Welcome to the Nightly News Podcast. This is Professor Paul Miller, and we are sitting in today, and we are so honored to be sitting in today with the newly minted president of Central Penn College, Dr. Linda Fedrizzi-Williams. Dr. Linda Fedrizzi-Williams, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. This is my third time here now.
This is your third time.
Which is very exciting.
And I do want to point out that the reason that we wanted to have you down today, obviously you're on our very special 50th podcast, right, but the reason that we wanted to have you down today is a lot of the things that we wanted to talk to you about were sort of off of the table.
I made you wait.
Well, because you were in the process of interviewing
Sure.
for the position, and it made perfect sense. You don't want to give any unfair advantages to your opponents
That's right.
by talking about some of your initiatives. So that really made a lot of sense to me. So this was obviously just recently you were named the president of the college. So some of the things that we want to talk about today have to do with some of these initiatives that you are trying to work on
Sure.
and still continue to work on. We will be joined later on in the podcast by Nightly News President Brian Christiana and Nightly News reporter Michael Ademola, and they are going to have, in the second part of the podcast, they've gotten together with some of the other students, and they've created some questions for you, so we'll do a little bit more rapid-fire Q&A
Excellent.
on the
Love
second part. But the first part, there's 4 big things that I want to talk with you about, and we're going to start right off the top. What does it mean to you? Personally, on a personal level, not necessarily a professional level, because obviously I'm sure it's very special to you on a professional level. But what does it mean to you personally to become the president of an institution?
Well, let me tell you, this is it's almost overwhelming how honored I feel. And what you have to understand is my entire dissertation was studying college presidents. You know, you reach a point in your studies where you question, can I keep doing this? You know, I had 2 young sons when I was going for my doctorate degree. I mean, I started when my one son was 2 and my second son, was 4. So for me, there were those moments, just like our students have, which is why I think I connect on a student level. I worked full-time. I had young kids. I was in this program. It's all-consuming. You can't always see a light at the end of the tunnel. And I thought, how do moms do this? How do women who have children make it to these high-profile positions? Is it even possible? So I went around the country and I interviewed college presidents who were mothers, women that had children and were college presidents. And there's not a lot of them. I mean, there's really not a lot of them. So to be studying and learning from these women and to find out how they did it, I never in my wildest dreams thought that I would be here at this point in my life. So it is such an honor. The other part of that is I came down to Central Penn 2 years ago. I mean, I only started 2 years ago as the provost. And the support of this community on a personal level has just been incredible. I mean, to know that I had the support of students, faculty, and staff, and that they wanted me to be their leader is touching in a way that's really indescribable. So, yeah, definitely one of the best moments of my life.
That is so interesting. Now, I do want to bring up something that you'd mentioned that I hope that I'm not, I hope that I'm not posing a question to you that's not something that you want to answer, but
Sure.
you brought this up you were just recently in my CPC Foundations class, something called imposter syndrome.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Is this something that you would like to address maybe on a personal level or maybe just as in general?
Absolutely.
So what we're talking about here, and you can feel free to elaborate, but imposter syndrome is something that many professionals go through, almost feeling like they're an imposter within their own career choice, and thinking that maybe sometimes down the road somebody will find out that they're a fraud, and
that's
really
exactly it.
just lacking. And to be honest with you, when I first started teaching, I had this bad.
I think every new professor has that on some level, that the students will figure it out. Meanwhile, the students are there to learn from you, right? But it's really about self-doubt. And it is so much more common than anyone realizes. And it doesn't necessarily even have to be just on a professional scale. You can suffer with imposter syndrome on many different levels. And usually it's when you're brand new to a role. The thing that becomes debilitating is when someone suffers with imposter syndrome and it prevents them from trying to do the next level or trying to get a promotion or trying even to be a college student We have adult students. I see it in their faces probably more than the traditional age, because the traditional age, you've been in school for so long that it's a natural progression. For people that have been away from college for a while and then decide to come back, when they're sitting in that classroom and they're surrounded by a lot of, students in their 18, 19, 20 age years, they feel a little bit like an imposter. The beautiful thing about it is an absolute mindset that is changeable. And so what I found, and when I found that, it was when I was doing my studies and I was interviewing these women, I could not believe that all of the participants, every single one in my study suffered with that at some point. And I remember feeling like, okay, it's not just me. Because at that point, I was new to a dean level. So I was only in the dean position. When I first went there, I was promoted within SUNY Orange. That's where I went. So I was a student there. I was a faculty member there. Then I was an assistant chair, a program chair, and a dean. And every time I made it to the next level, I started supervising people that were my teachers. Brian, it would be like you coming here, or Michael, it'd be like you coming here, and then all of a sudden one day you're the president of the college. Like it makes you unnerved, and you want to make sure you do a good job. So I absolutely struggled with that. I think it's something that women in particular struggle with, but men do as well. So yeah, teaching for the first time, absolutely. I remember thinking, I've never taught before. I've been in radio my whole life. Now I'm going to get up here and teach them about radio? Like, how am I supposed to do that? And the more you do it, the better at it you get. And it's every win that you have makes you more confident in that role, and it lessens that.
There's no question about it. In fact, I will be very blunt to say that I really suffered from this when I first started here.
Yeah.
To the point where, before I was brought on full time, I started doubting myself and thinking, is this really what I want to do for the rest of my life?
Right.
And I'm really glad that, again, I think you make a great point about the support of the people who you work with and work underneath, and who you're working with on a day in, day out basis, because I do think that this imposter syndrome is real, and I can honestly tell you that at one point in my career I definitely did go through that, and I'm glad that I had the support I did, because it really helped me. Well, now that it's official that you are the president, what I'd like to do is talk about some important academic initiatives that you have started or that you intend to start over the next, year or so. What are some of these academic initiatives that are ongoing currently that you'd like to talk about?
So I am a huge fan of ladder programs. Sometimes you'll hear them called stackable programs. And the idea for me, and the reason I feel so passionate about this, is with our student population that does work. I mean, majority of them work. I want a way for them, while they are going through their studies, to keep getting these milestones at every part of their studies, where they're essentially making themselves more marketable, more promotable. They can earn more of a living. So maybe your first year in a program, you're able to get a certificate in something, a certificate in leadership, a certificate in media. And the idea is that at every year, you're able to build more credentials. So yes, on your resume, it's going to have, your business administration, your bachelor's of science, and business administration, but you might also have certificates in leadership, certificates in nonprofit, certificates in grant writing, which makes you more employable.
Well, something that you brought up also with these ladder programs is the hope is that you would get a certificate your first year, and then instead of having to wait until you're complete with your bachelor's degree, you could enter into the workforce almost immediately.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the whole point, right? So you can, within your first year, you can have a job in the industry where you want to work. And then you can have an associate's degree that transfers into a bachelor's degree here that transfers into a master's degree. That's the big goal that I would love to have. And
are there any other schools that have tried to do something like this? Because in doing research for the digital writing certificate that we're in the process of doing, there's not a lot of colleges that do what we're actually trying to do. And in fact, a lot of times certificates are functioning as sort of a minor that students are taking as well. I don't know that I've seen in my research, and maybe I could be wrong, but I don't know if I've seen sort of the reverse way to do it. Because for a lot of students at other schools, it seems like that they're getting their bachelor's, but they're also getting a certificate in this.
They're adding it on.
Right.
Yeah.
As opposed to what we're trying to do is bringing in our new students.
Make it a part of your program.
Right.
Yeah. There are schools that do this. I mean, it's not a brand new idea. The trick is to make it part of your existing curriculum so that you're not making students have to take more credits. They don't have the money and they don't have the time. So if it's already built in, then when they stay, they're getting a bonus for staying. So yes, I do think you're right. There are schools that do that. They kind of make it a minor, or a certificate is something that's completely separate that they offer. But in this case, let's say, so I know you're working on a media certificate. You're doing a digital media certification. You're looking into what that would look like. There might be someone who had a communication degree from 20 years ago, like me. And all of a sudden, the technology has changed. I already have my degrees, but I want to know more about the digital platform. So I would be able to come here as an adult, someone who already has a degree, and I could take it just for the media certificate. Now, a student that's coming in right out of high school can get the media certificate first, then the associates, then the bachelor's.
So that's a very interesting point. Is it isn't necessarily just used for new students.
Oh,
it
no.
also can be used on its own.
Of course.
And for even other students that are in different disciplines.
That's right.
If they are taking a business and they want to concentrate maybe some of their general electives and get the certificate as well. So it can actually be used by new students, current students, and previous students.
That's the idea.
Which is what's interesting is when we were talking about the certificate, that was something that I'd brought up, is that this is actually more marketable to different types of students than maybe the way that other schools may maybe use their certificate programs.
Right. Exactly. So I think it's giving students more options in the types of credentials that they can have.
Well, I want to move on. There's no real easy way to transition from academics. And if there's any other initiatives you want to talk about, there will certainly be opportunities in the second part. But there's definitely something that you have been behind that I really think could go down as one of the greatest things that you're bringing to the table here. And that is the food pantry and the change in dining options. Yeah. One of the things, I had Morgan Littleford on. She was on our last podcast, and we talked with her about the SGA's role in identifying the dining options being an issue.
Right.
So let's first start off with, I know they kind of already announced it, but can you just talk about how the dining options are currently changed and how students might be able to locate those services if they need them?
Sure. So with dining options, and Morgan's right, that was one of the biggest complaints that I heard from SGA. And I meet with them. I think I meet with them tomorrow again. So I always want to hear what's working, what's not working, not just from faculty and staff, but from students. I want to know what's working. So they had some complaints, and the complaints were more around hours of service, options, food options, how they pay for food, the fact that students run out of their meal tickets, and that's a real problem. And so the more that I learned about this and the more that I looked into this, and I realized, I said, this is unacceptable. We have a responsibility as an institution to make sure that our students, one, are not going hungry, and two, that they are sustained for their classes. You go to class and you're hungry, you're not learning. It's a physiological need. You need to fuel your body and your mind. If you are hungry, that is going to take the place of you worrying about your homework. I mean, it's as simple as that. So in terms of food service options, a few things that we have done immediately is, one, the college is basically buying meals on weekends for students that are residents. And the reason, one of the reasons we're doing that is we're trying to give our food service provider a little bit of a break on weekends because they're stretched with what they're physically able to do. But we're also trying to save our students money on their meal plans. So if we could pick up the tab on weekends for now, it's less that they have to put on their meal plans. And we partnered with Weiss, who has been wonderful in giving us a ton of options for students to choose from on weekends, and then their meals that they can heat up. The other thing we're doing is we have a lot of athletes that live on campus, and they get back from practice sometimes 9 o'clock at night. So we are purchasing, they're vending machines, but they're basically huge refrigerators, and they will also have meals in them that students can purchase with their swipe cards, and they'll be able to heat those up.
Well, and you'd mentioned working with Wise. I'll tell you, one of the things that I've enjoyed is every time we've had an event over the last, year and a half.
Yeah.
We've worked with them, and they have just been so wonderful.
They're wonderful.
And it's great that we are able to build these partnerships in the community.
Absolutely.
And it's a win-win all across the board. We're working with our food service provider. We're also allowing students who are here to have access to food. Athletes, when they get back from practice, to have access to food. Because that's really what it is. It's about the lack of access.
It is.
It's not necessarily about it's not necessarily always a quality issue. It's really just access. And time that they're open. And I mean, frankly, if we are having a residential campus, which we do, there has to be some type of food options on the weekends.
Of course.
And unfortunately, really the only other food service venue, while not affiliated with the college, was the diner, which has since unfortunately closed.
Right.
So short of having to walk to the plaza right around the corner, our residential students are out of options at this point. So I think that that's wonderful that you made that an initiative. Okay, well, the other thing that I definitely want to mention, which I think is just so wonderful and I want to get behind in any way I can, is the food pantry.
Right.
And the new kitchen that is going to be the new 24-hour kitchen that's going to be available.
Yes.
So I'd really like to just hear more about how this all came to be and how this
Sure.
came to be an idea on your end.
So I quickly learned upon arriving here that our super suites, while gorgeous, don't have kitchens in them. And they're a great space for students. They get their own rooms. That's wonderful. But there's no communal kitchen space. And if our food services is not open for hours in the evening, then we need to give our students an option for cooking together. So we quickly identified that we needed to put together some sort of kitchen, and it's for our commuter students as well. I don't want anyone to think that it's just strictly for residential. But the idea is there is a kitchen that students can cook together. There's tables set over there now. The OTA faculty were kind enough to move down to the health science building, so we were able to take over the large space in Bollinger. And that's also where our food pantry is. So the food pantry, when I heard about the hunger issue on our college campus, and by the way, it's not just Central Penn College. This is a problem on college campuses nationwide, and students are hungry. And so I had a chance to visit Millersville University in the fall, and I was very impressed with their food pantry. And I asked them how they sustained it, and they had faculty and staff that donated. And I thought, well, we have an extremely generous faculty and staff. We have foundation members that want to be able to do this. We have local community. So Romeo Azandakan, our interim dean of students, called the Central PA Food Bank, and we were able to get donations from them, and the SGA got behind it, which made me so excited, and I think this is going to be a game changer for our students.
Just a quick question, and I was brainstorming this because I met with Sandy last week about we're trying to create some internal internships. One of the things that I thought about for something like this, did you ever think about maybe doing the paycheck deduction for faculty and staff? Is that something that might be a possibility?
It is, and we're trying to figure out how we can collect money through the foundation. Same thing like we do for Genes for Scholarships. It would be a similar idea. So we're working on the logistics, and Sandy's looking into that on her end, and we're trying to figure it out from the college's end.
Fantastic. So tell us a little bit more about the food pantry. So I guess my first question, especially with the kitchen, is who's going to be in charge of making sure it stays clean? Because I worked in the restaurant business my whole life, and if there's not somebody that's kind of overseeing the whole thing, people might come in, destroy the place, or not clean it up to, specifications, or have you thought that far down the line?
So I will tell you what I know. So Lindsay Garber and Romeo Azandakan are really the ones that are sort of championing how the kitchen will work and how the food pantry will work. And there has to be sign-up times because it's one kitchen. So we have sign-up times. Maybe clubs want to have dinner together, or certain organizations want to have dinner together. So they have to sign up. So we know who's in there when. And I think that Lindsay is really managing, checking up. You have to clean after yourself. It's a lesson, and I get it. College kids, I get it. Even if it was faculty and staff, right? Like there's always going to be that kind of issue. So. Yes, we'll have to. Well, you should talk to Lindsay, and I would get her on and actually pick her brain about it.
I will. But I think this food pantry thing is such a great idea. Can you talk about some of the things that long term that you expect in the food pantry and the types of food that will be available to students?
Yeah. So right now, we're looking mostly for non-perishable items, things like cereal, granola bars, anything. We're even looking for shampoos and conditioners and toothpaste and anything like that. I would love to get to a place where we'll be able to have fresh food options as well. I'm looking into food carts and farm stands on campus that can come for our students, but we're trying to do it in manageable chunks. So right now it's mostly non-perishable items.
Hey, anywhere is a good place to start when you have nothing in place. So I just think that this is something that the faculty and the staff can really, really get behind, and I think that this is something, and I said this to Morgan, and Isaiah, they were both on, and I said, do you know that if this is still going on in 10, 15 years, you can bring your family back to campus and say, you know what, I really hope to start this. And you're in the same boat.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
because this is one of your initiatives to start, and this was one of the very first things that you announced after you were chosen to be president.
Right.
And I think that this is something that has a much greater impact than really a lot of the other things that we're talking about. And no disrespect to any of the academic things we're trying to do or anything else, but this is something that can really change someone's life.
That's right. And again, it's fundamental.
So, food pantry and the kitchen, when are we looking for this to really be kicked off?
Well, we're starting it this summer. Yeah, I mean, the kitchen is up and ready. We're patching it, our facilities, and our facilities crew has been fantastic too. Let me give them a shout out, because we come up with these ideas and we want to make things happen. And for us, it's like, yeah, let's just move a kitchen. It doesn't seem like that big of a deal. It's a huge deal. And these men put in a lot of time to make these changes. So right now they're patching some walls. They're making it look a little bit nicer, but we're going to be ready to go this summer for both.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Now, if anybody, maybe we're still in the planning phases of this, but with the food pantry, I know that Morgan did say it was going to be anonymous, and there's going to be a form that can be filled out.
There is. It's going to be on our website. It's a WooFoo form, just like a lot of the other forms that we do, and students will be able to click the link and fill out the information.
And this is also not just exactly just like we talked about previously with the dining options, not just necessarily for residential students.
No.
Commuters, online students also have the access to this.
That's right.
Which I think is tremendous. All right, I have one final question before we move on to our student Q&A section. There have been 2 new student services employees hired. Number 1 is the new counselor, and number 2 is the new advising director. How might those 2 hires change or assist our current students with maybe things that are going on right now?
Yeah, 2 critical hires for this college. And I would say with counseling, we need programming for students. I believe in restorative practices, not just yelling when students do something wrong, but teaching them how to do something right, and maybe teaching them before something happens. Or when it does happen, say, hey, that probably wasn't the wisest decision. Here's what you could have done. We need our counselors to be equipped with substance abuse and substance abuse problems. That is nationwide as well. So having that kind of counselor with that background, and Tom has that background, which is exciting, it gives our students a place to go, and not just from the stress of midterms and finals, but again, we're talking restorative practices and really an education forum and new programming. The Advising Center, this is something I am so excited to bring back. We haven't had an Advising Center in 4 years. And again, not just talking about course scheduling. We're talking about student support advisors, student success advisors, that literally are the place where students can go when they have a question about anything. They can be directed to the right person, the right place, programming for our students. I frequently speak at the continuing ed new student orientation, because I love to talk to that population of students who are afraid to come back to college. And I will tell you, I asked the question, how many of you have never been to college before? There are a lot of them. So when you're a brand new student, you are coming in your 30s or your 40s, you've never been to college. It's already intimidating to be on a college campus. Now you throw an online platform, which they will absolutely have to take an online course at some point. It can be so overwhelming, and the faculty are fantastic. But the faculty only have so much time in a day to help those populations. If we can, again, have some programming and have an advisor that can reach out and say, hey, how's your first week going? Those little touch points for students make all the difference. So I think those 2 hires are absolute critical game changers too.
Something I wanted to bring up about the advising director, one of the biggest, I don't want to call it an issue, but one of the biggest things that we have seen is when often it is with night and online students, often they're transferring credits in. Mm-hmm. Credits like CPC foundations. Maybe they took it at another college.
Right.
Well, the one small issue with that is at least half of that course is really Central Penn specific. Right. So if you transfer that class in, you don't get the knowledge about our registration process. You don't get the knowledge about the online resources that exist here on this campus. And I understand why we accept those credits, and it makes perfect sense because it really is a college success class.
Yeah, sure.
But that said, I think that the advising director could really take the place of some of those CPC foundations whenever students are transferring that class in. I'll tell you what, I had a student who had to take it, and they were at Lancaster, and they'd said that it's a good thing they did because no one else in their class knew really anything about the registration process.
Right.
So I definitely think that could be a huge advantage.
For sure.
We do want to point out, though, that you are still going to have a faculty advisor, and we still are going to work with our students.
Of course.
Because it's, for especially for us in comm, it's essential that we work with our students because we need to make sure our classes are running.
And I think we need to be so clear with that. So when you're talking about career exploration, when you're talking about the best courses that you should be taking, you absolutely still go to your faculty advisor. You still go to your faculty member. The point is, this is a resource for students that need help immediately. You can't always reach your faculty member immediately. They're teaching 4 classes. So to try to find them in the middle of the day is difficult. And if you have an issue that you feel like it is critical, you get an answer, which, let's face it, our students often feel that every issue is critical and they need an answer.
That they do.
There is a place to go now. So that is exciting. That's going to take a little time to build, but we have a director at this point, and we'll start getting ready to staff that office.
Fantastic. All right, well, those are the questions that I personally have for you. But
Great.
as I mentioned, Brian Christiana, the president of the Nightly News, and Nightly News reporter Michael Ademola also have some questions that they've compiled from our students. So we will be right back with the student Q&A with the president of Central Penn College, Dr. Linda Fedrizzi-Williams. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Rabina Azizan from Career Services, and you're listening to the Nightly News Podcast.
Welcome back to the Nightly News Podcast here on episode 63. Very fortunate to be joined by the president of Central Penn College, Dr. Linda Fedrizzi-Williams. Well, Linda, you had the opportunity to answer some of my questions, but I posed Nightly News president Brian Christiana and Nightly News reporter Michael Ademola. I opposed them to go around campus last week and find some of their classmates, both of traditional, non-traditional, on-ground, online, to try to pose some questions that they might be able to ask you, since not all of those students couldn't be in here with us today. So that's what they've done. They've compiled some questions for you from some students here on campus, and we're going to do a little bit more rapid fire. So, Brian, welcome back to the podcast first and foremost.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Miller.
You're very welcome. What is your first question for Dr. Linda Fedrizzi-Williams?
The first question today is, what do you see happening in the next year at Central Penn College?
The next year, well, we talked about some of it in the first half. So the big changes are food services, food pantry, some new academic programming that we're rolling out, and another big thing is our nonprofit transition, which is something that we're in the application stages for.
All right, Michael, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
What was one of the questions that you came up with?
I wanted to ask, what has the transition from Vice President of Academic Affairs and Provost to President of the college been like?
That's a great question. So they are they're definitely different roles. So Vice President for Academic Affairs and Provost, you're very in charge of the internal part of the college. So I was overseeing all of the academic programs, student support services. As president, you're at a much higher level. You're not as in the weeds with the details, so you are really looking at everything from big picture and trying to identify the strategies for the college, the partnerships, the interim strategic plan, figuring out where we need to be and how to get us there. And then it's working with all those other departments. So a little more strategic planning and less day-to-day detail.
Well, you're also out in the community quite a lot
Yeah,
too,
I am.
right?
I am.
And that's probably a little bit different
That's
than being
new.
VPAA.
That is definitely new. So as VPAA, anytime I was out in the community, it was for academic affairs partnerships, talking about curricular changes, programs like that. This is bigger. It's how we can partner with other institutions, with other local organizations. So yeah, it's definitely a little different.
Okay. Brian, what's your next question?
What do you believe needs to happen to get student involvement on the rise regarding like clubs and activities?
And I will say, I've been walking around. Now, I know it's early on in the term, but there seems to be a little more involvement this term. And I don't know if it's just a fresh crop of new students and they're excited at the beginning, so it's keeping them engaged. I think an area that we need to get more engagement is definitely our continuing ed, our commuter, and our online students. Our online students, by the way, are local. They're mostly local. So something like 93% of our students live in Pennsylvania, and many of them live in this region. So they can get here for clubs and any kind of events that we have, sporting events, theater events, and I would love to see that happen. So I don't know if it's maybe targeting those populations, Brian, maybe asking those groups to come, but something like that.
Let me ask you a quick follow-up, and then, Brian, if you want to follow up as well. So one of the things that I was thinking, and this is just happened in a comm. We have a little task force with the faculty in comm, and I asked the question. So with the nightly news, I'm just using this as an example.
Yeah.
With the nightly news, our students are already developing a portfolio. At other colleges, and I do have some research on this that I will gladly share with everyone. There's been some other colleges that I've read about that have allowed students in their senior year, if they'd been involved in a club such as this, to put together a portfolio for credit. Is that ever something that we might think about doing? And that might certainly increase engagement in different clubs if they're able to produce something at the end.
I'm not sure about for credit, but what I can say is there are co-curricular transcripts, which is something that's very popular that I love, which is basically taking all of the activities that you attend or that you participate or that you volunteer in, and you add that to your transcript. So when you graduate, you don't just have your courses, you have everything else that you've done. But you're right about portfolios and building portfolios. So if participation is built into classes and if participation at events is part of a class, I think that's a way to get increased participation.
Fantastic. All right, Brian, did you have any follow-ups to that question?
No, she answered it very nicely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
All right, Mike, your next question?
You were recently in Professor Miller's CPC Foundations class. Do you plan to interact with students more in the classroom setting?
Oh, I would love to interact with students more. Michael, so every once in a while I'll meet a student that I see a lot of promise in, or students, any kind of students involvement that I can have. It's what I miss the most. You asked about the difference in the position. I'd say the biggest difference from being a professor and then going the administration route is you don't have as much time with students. And I miss that. So yes, I am more than happy to go to classes. I want to meet with the SGA. I meet with them regularly, go to events, go to sporting events, but any way that I can, for sure, I'd like to be involved.
Brian, your next question.
Well, you talked earlier about this switching over to nonprofit. What benefits will come with that?
There's a lot, and it's a lengthy process. So I just want to be careful to say that there are a whole lot of approvals we have to get. The biggest benefit for us would be that we would be able to apply for grants that we can't currently apply for. So there are so many student support grants that are out there that can give us additional personnel. There are grants that we could apply for technology, so we could have a Mac lab. That's something that a lot of institutions don't just put in their operating budgets. They apply for grants based on your student population. And we're not eligible right now for those types of things. So that is a huge advantage that would be given to us.
Michael, next question.
What partnerships in the community do you plan to develop, and how might these partnerships help the college?
So some of the partnerships, we talked a little bit about food services, and that's getting to know some of our local eateries and more partnerships like Weiss. I'm speaking with Harrisburg Area Community College on some potential partnerships that we could do together, having to do with residential populations, having to do with shared facilities, being able to use their gym and their theater, and they'd be able to have students come here to use some of our facilities. So those are some of the partnerships. And then working more with some nonprofit agencies. I think that we can do some very creative academic programming in our classes where our students are tasked with coming up with concepts and coming up with ideas for nonprofits that's benefiting our community, and it's giving our students information that they can put on their resume. That's the project-based learning that some of you have heard me talk about. So that's another thing.
And even some of the things that the club has done, doing the event when we did the gala is a learning experience. Yeah, it was fairly laid back, but there was still a level of professionalism that needed to happen there. The organization needed extra hands, and being there was a great learning experience for the students.
And you don't forget that, and that's the kind of experience when you're in college that you have that you don't forget, and those are the skills that are transferable when you're in your real world.
Absolutely. Brian, next question.
Are there any new programs being developed for future use?
Yeah, so you mean like academic programs?
Yeah, like any new majors coming.
Okay, so certificates, like I talked about,
Yeah.
We just got approved for phlebotomy. Do any of you know what that is? It's taking blood.
That's pretty cool.
So for medical assisting, many of them are in our medical assisting program, and they sit for that certification anyway. Now it's getting built into their actual their associate's degree. So that's exciting. We're looking at some other options for certificates that can be part of it. And then the other big area where there's a need for programming is really in healthcare in this region, in this area, and it has to do more with taking care of the elderly. We are a huge retirement location in the country. We're actually the second behind Florida in the entire United States. So coming up with programming that targets taking care of the elderly or tourism, some of those types of things, I think we need to look into.
I know that the college's percentage of retention has increased by 9% since you've been here for the past year. I wanted to know, what have you done to promote increased retention of students?
So I think there's been a couple of things. One, we took a hard look at some of our policies and the way that we were communicating with students and making sure that those policies still made sense. So withdrawing students if they hadn't attended class, that is something we have to comply with the federal government, but it depends at what point. So looking at some of our policies, increasing student support. We have ways for professors to contact our retention officer and our interim dean of students when they do notice a change in behavior in students, so that person can reach out and say, hey, what's going on? So that was something that we started to do. Giving more notification if a student's not doing well in a class, letting them know, we noticed you haven't been in class, or we noticed you're not doing as well as you normally do. Little things like that have helped in the retention. The other big thing is just making sure there are dedicated people that are there for students. When some of our students come in academically a little underprepared, putting them in courses with the same students so that they're part of a cohort and they have a built-in network. So those are some of the things. I know not every student may see that, but a lot of the decisions we make in terms of your first term here are very deliberate.
Brian, next question.
All right, this is my final question, but it's not really like academic.
Okay.
But with your busy schedule, what do you do on your free time?
My free time. So I have a husband and 2 children, and we just moved and we have a pool. So right now, a lot of our free time is spent swimming. Brian, I saw you at the Maroon 5 concert. So while I would love to say that I go to concerts all the time, I don't, but I love music, and that is something that I would want to do more. So music, movies, taking my sons to lacrosse games and cheering them on at their lacrosse games. That's pretty much what I do.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a whole lot of free time.
Especially,
I mean, when you have a
right
family
now.
and you're working, well over 40 hours a week. I mean, there's the free time is limited.
And I read
at
a
best.
lot. That's the other thing. I read a lot. I read probably a mixture for professional reading and for fun, but I probably read 1 to 2 books a week, which sounds insane. But for me, that is my downtime.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's
2
a
a
nighttime
week.
thing.
Well, and the thing is, I have like 5 books I want to read, and when I was on vacation, I said I want to read one of the books, and I got through like half of it. And it wasn't that I wanted to stop; it's just
You get distracted.
Yeah, we had so much going on, so I've got quite a collection of books that I need to
Well, maybe
read.
you could share some with me. I just finished one last night, so I'm ready for a new one.
I've got a lot of really good ones. One of them is actually something I'm considering as a textbook, but it's not a bad leisure read for somebody who's in communication. So,
All right.
Gentlemen, have any other final questions before we move on to my very last question for Dr. Fedrizzi?
No.
All right. Well, I do want to tell you guys, thank you so much for going out of your way and for chatting with
Yes.
other students and bringing these questions to the table, because I think understanding what the future of Central Penn holds with the nonprofits, with the transition in food, with the new student services that are coming, I think all of these things are very, very important for our current and even alumni or maybe future potential students to understand. All right, well, I'm going to give you the last question here that I've come up with. There's almost no way that you can enter into a new position like this and not think about what the long-term vision is. In fact, I'm pretty sure that's probably in your job description somewhere.
Yeah, it is.
It is to maintain the long-term vision, and that's typically 5 years out. They don't ask you to go a whole lot farther than that, do they?
No, strategic plans are usually 5 years. I think that's and to stay in touch with trends, you're usually looking at 5 years.
So here's the question. Let's say 10 years from now, so beyond that strategic plan that already exists, what do you see for the future of our college? What is it obviously you've talked about a lot of your important initiatives, but even some of those are a little bit more shorter term, and we hope to get them implemented. So if we're looking at a long-term, say 10-year view, how do you think we're going to look in 2028?
Wow, 2028 is 10 years. I am a long-term planner. It's fun for me. I enjoy that. I will say in terms of the details, obviously I will involve the entire college community. But I think we have a niche and a need in this community. I think that is only going to continue to grow for us. our potential for growth, especially once we transition to a nonprofit institution and we can take any kind of money that we have and pour it into this college for our students, we are just going to continue to be a viable resource for this community. I don't want us to be the best kept secret. I've heard that now for 2 years, and I think that's crazy. We're not the best kept secret. We need to get that out of here. I don't want us to be a secret. I want to be a real hub for this community. I would love to build the surrounding Ademola, East Pennsboro, Somerdale communities and have them have their events here, have a true partnership where our students are literally going to events all around in the community. I think our programming will continue to grow, and I want everyone to feel comfortable with the fact that, yes, we are career oriented and you're going to come here and we're going to help you get a job because that's why you've chosen us. You're going to have your liberal arts foundation, so you will be able to talk to anyone and you will have those critical thinking skills, but we're going to help you get employed. And if you're down on your luck, you come back and we're going to continue to help you. And that's something our career services office is already doing, but I only see us growing, and it doesn't mean that we're growing to a huge size. We need to grow to a sustainable size where we are supporting our alumni and producing graduates for this community.
Speaking of growth, we just happen to have a major plot of land on the opposite side of the road.
That's true.
In 10 years, where do you see that major plot of land being ending up?
That's a great question. We have talked about making that into sort of a recreational facility and really looking at expanding our athletic programs. And that is for residential, commuter, online students, whoever wants to participate. But we have some drawings already of what that may look like. And that would include, a soccer/lacrosse field, a baseball field with lights outside, and a field house for basketball. So if we're able to eventually get to that point, I think that would be fantastic for this entire community.
Well, and there's no question, certainly from a nightly news perspective, if all of our sporting events
is in one location,
were held on one location,
where you're not traveling,
right? It'd be a lot easier for us to make sure that those games would be broadcast.
That's absolutely part of the long-term plan for us.
Well, is there anything else that you would like to mention when we're talking about what you see in the future of Central Penn College?
I don't think so. I want everyone to know I'm here for the long haul. I told you I have 2 young sons. I would love for them to grow up on this campus and really get to know the students like I get to know the students. I think we have nothing but bright roads and futures ahead of us. I do see growth on the college campus in terms of facilities. I think that's something that can happen. You asked me about transitioning to a nonprofit and what some of the benefits are. Another one is capital campaigns, being able to raise money, being able to fund initiatives that we can build new buildings and expand. So I think our future is bright and I'm excited to be part of it.
Fantastic. Well, that brings us to the end of the podcast today, Dr. Fedrizzi. I got to tell you that this has probably been the best of all 3. I don't
you think?
I don't like saying that, but I think
there's so many good things happening.
I think last time a lot of the things that we wanted to talk about, it was like, I can't talk about this. We can't talk about that. And I, as soon as you said it, I thought, I don't even know why I posed the questions to you in the first place. Now we're actually, okay, let's get down to business.
Yeah,
I'm here.
We're doing it.
I'm here. We're doing it. We've got new food service options. We have new student services. We have, a long-term view. We have a nonprofits coming through. We have certificates coming through. I mean, this is as revolutionary of a time as we've seen on this campus for 30 years.
It really is. I think we are at a major turning point for the college. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate your time today.
Thanks.
All right. Well, Brian and Mike, thank you both so much for the time that you're taking to be here today and also compiling the questions from both yourself and the students. So, Mike, thank you for being here.
No problem.
And Brian, of course, thank you for being here as well, my friend.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Well, that will get us out of here, Dr. Linda Fedrizzi-Williams. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're so busy.
Are you kidding? I love this. This is like one of my favorite things to do.
Well, we will have you down again very soon, and we'll follow up with you about some of these initiatives, see where we are. We will sign out today. And so for Nightly News President Brian Christiana, Nightly News reporter Michael Ademola, and for President of Central Penn College, Dr. Linda Fedrizzi-Williams, this is Professor Paul Miller, and we'll catch you next time on the Nightly News Podcast.